Hello everyone! Time for another railway, and a quite envious one this time. Get it? Because of envy Peccatula. We're not even fighting Peccatula really. What a masquerade. Okay, that's enough. So time for another guide to help you all optimize a bit, and for those struggling. Funnily enough, this might be the easiest railway to get under 100 turns in my opinion, and getting a full 12 IDs in total can help go through waves in general, but at the same time, it's very likely the most complex one yet. So let's get into the specifics for this railway. In Railway 4, there is a total of 13 stations divided into 4 sections for a total of 4 fights. What? Well, each station is not a fight, but a wave, excluding the rest stops that they kept from Railway 3, where you can still change your loadout and reset your whole team's HP. It also resets SP this time, so each section you will start entirely anew, except for ego resources which are kept. So as I said, each section is a fight of 2 or 3 waves, which includes a certain number of enemies between 1 and 12. Also what that means, there are a few things. First, with egos, fights being in waves mean that egos passives are kept between waves, so egos with stronger passives get more advantages, like Dimension Shredder Yisang or Regret Mersault. Also, you'll have to go through your whole skill rotation, so IDs whose burst is limited to their skills tree might be less interesting. However, IDs needing to stack on Charge, Self-Tremor or Poise will keep it between waves, making them more consistent than archetypes like Burn or Rupture. Anyway, I'll detail the specifics of each wave individually a bit later. But first, I have to talk about the new system of deployment. In Railway 4, you still have 6 IDs at once on the field. However, you choose an order for your 12 Sinners, and when one of them die, they are replaced by one of those remaining in backup in order of deployment. Also, don't worry about losing sanity for Sinners dying, you just don't. Sinners dying will grant ego resources for each of their skills seen, proportional to the skill's rank. So 1 for skill 1, 2 for skill 2, and 3 for skill 3. This can allow strategies to gain ego resources faster, but getting your Sinners killed is a time investment as well, so be careful. The deployment order also has another big important feature, as each deployment order number has a different buff granted to its Sinner, as shown in this picture. The Sinner deployed first would get 2 levels, the second starting SP, third offense level, etc. All backup members get starting SP to compensate. So a few recommendations for each of these buffs. The first one being ID level is a straight stat upgrade for HP, offense level and defense level, so give it to your best Sinner, with the one will usually receive the bench supports anyway. Second is starting SP and SP heal efficiency, increasing the speed at which the ID will gain SP from clashes and kills. This is good for IDs benefiting from a jump start in SP and needs it faster, or those more prone to SP variation, an excellent example being Dawn Sinclair. It can help IDs like Butler Otis getting passive active, or Bullet Otis getting back SP. Good for clashes, consistency, or if the Sinner's gonna use egos. Third is offense level, which is plain clashing and damage increase, so better on damage dealers and counters. Fourth is defense level, good for tanks. Fifth is max speed, and should be for IDs who want to set up ASAP, like Talisman Sinclair, or for one turn setup like LCCB Ishmael, Rabbit Heathcliff, Everlasting Faust, etc. Sixth being max HP is good for tanks or some supports targeting max HP characters, for example. Then in backup, 7 is for clash power, so generally good, 8 is damage taken reduction, so better for IDs that will tank, 9 is aggro, so for actual tanks, or at the very least ID you want targeted, 10 is damage dealt increase, for damage dealer, 11 is final power plus 1, strong, especially for IDs with more coins, and 12 is ID level plus 3, so like the first but better, but if you get there, you might already be in trouble. So that's about it for this railway specificity. However, before getting into details for each section, it also introduced a whole new type of fights against Envy Peccatulas, which I'd like to explain as a whole. I'll call them Envy fights, Peccatula fights, Mimics, False PvP, What the heck, What is this role, I can clash, I got outsped, gotta reset. While most boss fights end up being pretty straightforward with one gimmick, Peccatula fights end up being the hardest and most complex fights in the run, and can become a source of headaches. But how do they work? Well, simple. Everything you can do, they can as well. But better, with nice additional buffs. They have scene resources, combat passives and support, egos, resonance, IDs, same resistances and stats, pretty much everything. But as their log says, they are missing one thing, and that is you, executive manager. AKA, they are not the smartest bunch. And you act second. They are perfect copies of your sinners, with preset IDs and egos among those available in the game as of now, all uptime / threat speed 4 and max leveled. So you'll see that they can be a real threat, especially considering that they can also use egos and rake your entire party. But you see how your IDs can vanish into thin air once hit and staggered? Well, the neat thing is, you can do it as well. So while they can seem scary, here are a few bits of advice. First of all, high attack weight egos are the best thing you can do to quickly get staggers and turn the whole fight in your favor. Don't forget about the redirection trick to get the targets you want. However, which ego to use depends on enemies' weaknesses, so you can deal as much damage as possible. I'll give wave specifics in details, but all IDs have one fatal physical weakness and 2 scene weaknesses based on their Zion ego, so the base one for most of them, but some like Gregor or Sinclair will have their better version. As a general rule, Lust, Gluttony and Envy are weaknesses we can find quite a few times, while there is no Pride weakness. However, since they can use egos, their weaknesses will also change when they use them, which means that you'll likely have to adapt on the fly, and you can only really rely on the physical weaknesses. However, they will never use egos on the first turn, so you can plan around that at least. By being able to choose with which skill you attack which target, you can do a lot of optimization on the damage each turn. In the end, those fights have a lot to take into account, so don't hesitate to take time preparing your turn in those fights. But anyway, that's enough preamble, so let's get into each section details. I'll first explain each wave specifics and advice, and then make a summary for the whole section and my picks. So let's start with section 1, with the first wave, Portrait of a Certain Day. First of the 3 new abnormalities this season, Portrait of a Certain Day, or Portrait for short, is a pushover. It has a bit less than 2k HP and only 1 body part, which is also the case for all other single enemy waves. This thing's gimmick is that it will summon portraits on turn 3 after an event. Losing this event hurts, by the way, minus 30 SP. You can't target the portraits yet, but they'll inflict sinking potency and count to all your sinners each turn, and if they stay alive for 3 turns, you'll get even more, which can be scary later on. Also, while the portraits are up, the abnormality has increased physical resistances, which drop once the portraits disappear. So you want to destroy them and then burst the abno. When it summons the portraits, it will randomly associate its skills to each portrait, and winning a clash against the skill will reveal the portrait so you can attack it. However, you can only damage one portrait, the Master's portrait. But destroying it will get rid of the others, and it's very easy to find. It will have a brighter glow while clashing and afterwards, sound effect when clashing, and is the only one using a block skill called the Master's portrait. I know PM fans can't read, but it should be obvious enough. For this mission, here are its weaknesses. Bringing Slash helps, but the best way to bring it down is through archetypes, like Burn, Rupture or Tremor, especially since it's weak to Pride and Sloth. Tremor does need ego resources for Cavernous Wailing however, so careful, but Time Moratorium should still be beneficial. Same for Sinking and Rhyme Shank. Next, probably the biggest turn waster of the run, the Butlers, which includes a whopping 10 units with 2 mid-bosses. You'll start with the 6 Butlers of the Edgar family, which can be annoyingly fast. Not much to say, as it's the usual fodder with maybe 1 scary skill, other than that they are all weak to Slash. Unfortunately, Slash Ego with more than 3 attack weight are in very high demand for very low offers as of this video, limited to Overclocked Sanguine Desire and Garden of Thorns, both very high cost, as well as Yi Sang's Force Match Flame, not rolling very high. Mentioned for Contempt or Yoshu, which might save us. Also mentioned for the IDs having Slash AoE skills, aka Don Sinclair, Butler Yoshu, and Biel Mersault. And Cheesecliff. Once at least one of them has fallen, a first Wuthering Heights Butler will appear. Only one though it seems, the second one needing 1 more turn. They work in a similar way, with Sinking, and are weak to Blunt. After them, once at least 3 enemy slots are free, Josephine will enter the arena. She will gain power from your units sinking. This can get scary if you got hit a few too many times, so be careful. She is also weak to blunt, but not fatal. Also, she will get unstaggered at the end of the turn, like she had inhaled some Gossipium, so the best way to bring her down is to focus her on the same turn she gets staggered. Last but not least, Nelly, with the highest max HP in this wave, will enter once only one other unit is left, or if Josephine is killed, maybe, could not confirm. But that means that if she's not killed before finishing all other Butlers, you'll have to face both of them at the same time. So you might want to kill Josephine before the remaining Butlers. Nelly can have higher clashes, but mostly function like his base fight, but less frightening. He doesn't have physical weaknesses, only seen once. But using anything outside of Sloth and Pride is good, with mentions for Wrath and Envy. Overall, this fight will take time, and there isn't much you can do about it, but at the same time, it will be one of your main sources of ego resources for the next sections probably. To conclude this first section, we fight against Nelly, and she is the easiest probably. No particular gimmick to go around, except her Butler's mark shenanigans, which you might want to be careful about. She also has the bind techniques, but well, even if she starts at 30 SP, you're coming in with most IDs at 45 most likely, and you could use one ego. I don't have much to say, she's weak to slash and that's about it. Like for the portrait, damage archetypes will do wonders to rush her. If you can't rush her, you'll have to play around her mechanics, but even then you can probably get her quick enough. I have to mention that this is directly after fighting Nelly, and when fighting him, you might want to keep a setup ready to rush Nelly ASAP. But anyway, that's it for section 1. You might have guessed it, but slash is great for most of the fight. Blunt is second, and none of those two are resisted anyway. So you guessed it, Pierce IDs have it rough, being resisted by almost everything. Which is also why among all archetypes, Bleed might be the toughest, with IDs like Ring, Sang and Otis, and Faust or Pequod is. Burn can be good, Don Sinclair doing a great job on wave 2, even if he is harder to play. Regret Faust and Spice Bushy Sang can do some AoE work. Since the section has 2 bosses, bringing archetypes is still your best bet, even if depending on which you use, wave 2 might be somewhat longer. However, be very careful. While playing Blade Lineage for slash galore and poise stacking the whole fight is tempting, you have to think that this section is your source of ego resources going into section 2. Believe me, you will need it. To use egos like Faust, Fruit Sack or Heathcliff Yasunyata to get a jumpstart in SP, which will help a lot, you'll need Lust, Gloom and Envy, which Blade Lineage can lack. So you'll have to take Sin Generation into account while doing your team. Otherwise, as individual IDs, a few strong examples include W. Don and Ryoshu, Butler Ryoshu, BL Mersault, Diechi Onglu, or Don Sinclair. For Blunt, the usual Diechi Rodion and Molaritis can help. Now we're getting into the fun stuff with section 2 and Mimics. And the first wave is none other than the whole Corp crew. Support includes Bleed and some more general. Usually you won't have to care about most bench supports anyway. You might want to care about Faust whistles though if they proc it. The good thing about Corp is that IDs outside Faust and Sinclair don't clash too high. Starting the second turn, they'll start using egos and will tend to use the highest clashing ones available. So if you don't want to clash with Don's Fruit Sack or Mersault's Pursuant, well, you know what to do. They aren't too fast, so you might be able to stagger them before they have time to use them. Otherwise, here are the enemy's base weaknesses. As I said, in NV fights, Sin weaknesses can change with ego uses, but they are good for first turn projection at the very least. And this projection gives mostly Blunt, with some slash, and mostly Lust and Glue. Among good 5+ attack weight egos for those things, Heathcliff Yasunyata and Faust Fruit Sack are perfect choices, as they'll also jumpstart most of your ID's sanity at 45. Otherwise, here are a few egos that are either cheap 3 attack weight or 5+ awakening attack weight that can be of use. Using egos turn 1 to get some easy staggers is one of your best bets, and then for focuses, while Mersault's Pursuance can be scary, the Mersault ID isn't, as most IDs. Claire is fragile and should be taken care of ASAP to avoid any potential corrosion from allies' death. Faust is also a good target, and then Don and Heathcliff to avoid Fruit Sack and Teleport. Roger is likely to use Sanguine Desire, which isn't too scary damage-wise if resisted, or Force Match Flame, which can be clashed against. The second wave is actually scary. Or June is rather, because it's Kurokumo time. You first have the small fries until one is left, where June actually appears. The henchman can clash somewhat, and June is scary on that part, gaining slash power from his skill. He also still has his counter, which gains coins by the number of remaining allies, so make sure to prioritize killing other survivors if you can't just tank it. They are all weak to slash, so bringing some is best, including AoE like Butler Yoshu or Don Sinclair. With enough damage, you can stagger him before he does his sky clearing cut, which you could have trouble clashing against. However, he's only 1.2 weak and quite tanky, so you'll need quite a bit of damage. Some egos can help speeding up the process of killing the henchmen, like Red Eyes or Rodion's Pursuance, but be careful about your resources, as you'll still need more for what's coming up. Because once you're done with Kurokumo, well, time for Blade Lineage. All of them. Yes, all. So the few notes. First, they all start with 30 SP and Nebulizer for lows, so 4/4 poise. They are all resistant to slash, half of them fatal to pierce, the other to blunt. At the start, there are also 3 lust weaknesses, as well as gluttony and envy. So the egos of choice still include Heathcliff Yasunyata, as well as Otis Ebony Stem this time. Yisang, Otis, and Sinclair are all weak to both Pierce and Envy, so Telepole and Electric Screaming can also have great value if you hit those 3. Otherwise, the lack of Pride and Sloth weaknesses make Blind Obsession and Sun Shower more awkward. Talking about Sun Shower, Otis' version is something you can add to the list of things you don't want to clash against, as well as Yisang's Dimension Shredder. Otis is slow, however, so you might want to prioritize Yisang. As a few additional notes, Mercil's here, so careful if Pride Raise 3 is activated. Also, avoid clashing Yield My Flesh. You have been warned. Sinclair's to claim their bones is also not easy to clash against. Dawn is the fastest, so you might want to make sure she's staggered for turn 2. Killing Mercil before he procs his In Memoriam is probably better, or at least staggering him. So that's it about section 2. Once you know how false PvP fights work, it's mostly about knowing the particular weaknesses of each encounters. Kurokumo fight is also pretty straightforward. As a note for Mirror fight though, as I said there's very few patterns, so you'll have to adapt to the situation. But if you start the fights with the right egos, the task can be insanely simplified. So as I said, Heathcliff Yasunyata and Faust Fluid Sac are probably the 2 best options for not only crushing them, but also to get to 45 SP ASAP on first fight. You can proc Yasunyata 15 plus SP condition easily if you give him second position, starting SP, and winning a clash by the way. Bringing Ebony Stem and a Telepole or Electric Screaming will help a lot against Blade Lineage. Because of Kurokumo in between, and also because egos will already stagger most Peccatulas, you might want to take a bunch of slash IDs to speed up the second wave, so I can recommend again some of the IDs I talked about in the first section. However, this time, since all fights have multiple enemies, damage status' archetypes seem like a waste. The Blade Lineage is not concerned, and could be thought of if you have enough of the missing ego resources stacked already. Just take your time thinking your moves. Your turns are limited, not your time. Funny since we're still in T-Corp district. Anyway, we're getting into section 3, and probably starting with the hardest wave in the railway. Another Envy Peccatula fight. But this time, the support is not just support, it's backup. So they'll fill the missing spaces in the enemy team as their number dwindles. And oh boy, what a composition. I think they looked at all our tier lists, just took most of the top IDs, with a few more tanks to be annoying, because you have to spend resources on them. Also, the backup can use egos right away, so don't be scared to see a 7 Otis, 8 speed Sun Shower pop up and go what the heck, what is this roll, I can't clash, I got outsped, got a reset. So yeah, that's a trial. Of your patience and forethought mostly. Order of backup is fixed, so be prepared. I'd love to give priorities, but if I said you can just leave Onglu alone, you're gonna take a Dimension Shredder to the face. Also, since they tend to use egos, he'll lack sins for his passive, so don't worry about it. I'd love to give advice for this fight, but gosh is difficult. First, jumpstarting your SP with Fluid Sac, Blind Obsession, Holidays or Yasunyata is a good idea. Second, let's look at the resistances. Total weaknesses include 6 blunt, 2 pierce and 4 slash, with 4 blunt in the first 6. Including the fact that 3 of the first 6 are weak to Lust and 4 to Gluttony, this makes Yasunyata even better, as well as others like Rhodion's Effervescent Corrosion, Legerdemain, or even Ebony Stem. In the first part, W Dawn, Ryoshu and Arcleaf are all very squishy, and can and should be eliminated ASAP. Armor Salt and K on Glue are more complicated, and at least on Glue you should wait a bit for passive to be offline. Afterwards, there is no real plan and you'll have to adapt. Otis is probably a priority because of her high speed with Sun Shower, even if she is tanky. Ring Sang and Captain Ishmael are squishy and should be taken care of quickly before they can deal high damage or use Blind Obsession respectively. Rodion isn't that scary if you can clash, same for Gregor. Sinclair is harder to clash, but is last, so it should be easier staggering him. As a note, you can feel the actual lack of slash resistances right now, as only 7 Faust resists hit there, so as there is a good number of Lust weaknesses, feel free to bring in one of the higher attack weight Lust/Egos if you can afford them. Envy is present quite a bit in the second half, so bringing Red Eyes Open, for example, could be good, though second half will come bit by bit and shouldn't be taken as a wall by itself, as you'll rarely have all of them at the same time, or at least not before a few turns. Meanwhile, the second wave is relatively tame, if you exclude the aggressive unclashable AoE turn 1, which can stagger your units close enough to the threshold, so you might wanna heal. Anyway, here comes the Dreaming Electric Ship. This gimmick is interesting. First of all, it spawns the generator on turn 2, which is invincible. The generator has a small skill that can inflict paralysis and is annoying. Every turn, the ship will accumulate energy as well as charge with its skills. If you don't prevent it from finishing its charge by reaching 1, you'll have to take the AoE from earlier, boosted from its charge. Really boosted. To prevent it, you'll have to hit the generator, which will literally give a plug to the sinner that hit it once per turn. The following turn, you have to plug it to the ship by winning a clash against Grounding Refusal, its Pride skill. And yes, it has to be this skill. Also, this skill gives it more protection the less plugged in it is. Once you've done it 3 times, it will get staggered and lose all charge, so you might want to beat it up right then. It will also delay its mass attack. So just win clashes, and don't forget to alternate sinners, so one is plugging the ship, while another takes another plug. It feels so weird to say it like this. Anyway, its weaknesses mostly include Pierce, Gloom and Sloth as Fatal. So since it's a one body part boss that can fall victim to status archetypes, they can all be played. However, while Sinking is probably a good option due to increased Gloom weakness, Tremor Reverb and Time Moratorium have a field day. So for the section, since the Peccatula fight is so dependent on egos and hard to totally predict, bringing a team to get the ship faster would be the better bet, so for me the better way to do it is choosing IDs depending on the boss part and adjust sinners and egos for the first part, which means here that most status archetypes are good, but mostly Tremor Reverb or Sinking. I remind to still take some sinners able to use key egos for the first wave, like Heathcliff, Faust, Otis or Yoshu. Depending on the archetype, it can be more or less easy. Otherwise, ID's base weaknesses and the ship's weaknesses don't really overlap, same for physical type, so hard to recommend one in particular, except maybe Pierce, because as I've said, IDs should get staggered by egos anyway. If you can prepare a setup for the ship like Talisman Sinclair or Time Moratorium, feel free, however ego usage and adaptation during the first wave can make it difficult. Just don't forget that there is still a section left, so be careful on your sin resources to not spend everything at once. And talking about the last section, it's time to enter the Hall of the King in Binds. Section 4 includes both the King in Binds fight and beforehand another Peccatula fight based around Sinking this time. And if I talk about both, it's because they are somewhat linked. But let's start with the first wave. The fight will start with an event where you choose a mask to wear. All masks will give 20 SP jumpstart to your IDs, minus 24 minus coins, as well as the Grand Welcome passive, granting additional ego resources on kills and staggers. So it's pretty clear that you should get most of the things you need for your egos as the fight progresses. Choosing the Mask of Joy increases max speed by 2 for all your IDs, good if you're worried to not be able to redirect. The Mask of Sorrow grants them 1 clash power, which is just nice to help with clashing. Finally, the Mask of Wrath gives all your units 10% damage increase, obviously a choice if you want to clear it faster. The enemies will also start with 20 SP and Grand Welcome, as well as 1 final power up. Why not? They also have a special status, Bandages of the King in Binds, which will inflict sinking potency and count to all your sinners when killed, before transferring this status to its killer if it doesn't have it, or a random other one otherwise. This status is important for later, but if your sinners don't get killed too much in an unfortunate order, they should all have it by the end, as well as a bunch of sinking. Now for the fight itself, well, it's pretty much like Section 3, where you'll have to go through all 12 sinners at once. Looking at their weaknesses, you can already see that 9 of them are weak to Pierce, with only 2 resistances. That already means that Sun Shower, Ebony Stem and Blood Obsession are all great, the last one also granting you the missing SP for max. However, only one of them has a Pride weakness, and their 2 least resisted seeds are Lust and Gluttony, meaning that Ebony Stem is the best option to start off the fight, and to conclude it. They are mostly resistant to Blunt, so the other egos mentioned earlier won't be as effective, though the high amount of Lust weaknesses can make Yasunyata a valid option if you don't have Blind Obsession. A last reminder that weaknesses can change, so outside of turn 1, basing yourself on Pierce for egos is more important than on sins. Regarding priorities, well, first of all, Ryushu and Otis are both fast and have strong egos, so try to bring them down first. Ishmael is probably to be considered too. The HEIDs seem to discard, but no idea which they are discarding, but since they don't use the discard trick, Anglu shouldn't be scary on that part. He will still be scary clash-wise, and should be prioritized since he is squishy. And same for Dodd. Sinclair isn't scary for his egos, but his speed and strong skills can still be scary. Muscles can be worrisome too. Finally, I have to talk about Heathcliff, who will corrode if you're not careful enough and don't eliminate him fast enough while winning clashes against him. And taking a telepole corrosion is extremely uncomfortable, same for binds, so you might want to make him a higher priority. Overall, with proper ego usage, the fight can be done pretty quickly. However, don't forget to keep some resources if needed for the second wave. Because here it comes, the King in Binds! Finally! And this fight promises to be grand, but it's disappointing. The fight starts with a mask change, where you throw the old one and choose a new one. The 3 choices are SP heal for Joy, 2 ego resources of each for Sorrow, and 1 damage up for the fight with Wrath. SP heal is useless unless you are in trouble and actually missing quite a bit, so you'll probably want one of the other 2 most of the time. If you need some ego uses like with Tremor, Sinking, or Bleed, and that's where most of your damage will come from, you might not care as much about damage and more about resources. Otherwise, Wrath is just good. You'll have to pass a check to not be consumed by them though, which will reduce Sinner's sinking potency and count by half if succeeded. Which is good, because you should be around 25-12 at that point. And it's relevant, because the King in Bind strength mostly comes from your unit's sinking, which will increase its skill power quite a bit. Winning clashes against it will reduce your count and avoid you losing all your SP, so that's better. One of the skills is also applying Bandages of the King in Binds to the unit winning clash against it, which is good if you're somehow missing some. And that's relevant, because this King's only other mechanic is its AoE skill, Present Thyself Before the King, which inflicts very high damage to all your sinners, Tremor Burst equivalent to Sinking, and grants it strong buffs next turn, including AoE on all its skills, like Heathcliff's Bind. However, your units with the bandages will be shielded from it entirely, except for Tremor Burst, but we won't give you Tremor. But as long as you have the bandages on all of your units, and can clash with all its other skills, which can be eased with Chains of Other for example, the fight is really simple. It starts with HP reduced from the first wave, has flavor, and has about as much as the other knows on this railway. So it's kind of a disappointing last fight, if you're not counting the first wave with it. Its weaknesses are a bit of the opposite of this first wave as well, which can be annoying, being weak to blunt and resistant to pierce, gloom and sloth weak but resistant to lust, gluttony and envy, which is why bringing IDs for it and egos for the fight before is better. Since gloom and sloth are good, bringing sinking and tremor is incentivized, as well as time moratorium. Even further by blunt being a weakness. But like for the other bosses, other statuses can work as well. It is the last fight, so use all the egos you want that can help. So for section 4, I'll say the same thing as for section 3, which is bring IDs and team comp to speed up the boss, as it's the only predictable thing, and adjust sinners and egos to go through the first wave quicker. Better comps are the same as for section 3 too, as tremor reverb and sinking will melt the king. Pierce being the best for first wave, Yi Sang, Ishmael and Otis are advised for Sun Shower, Blind Obsession, and Ebony Stem respectively, especially the last two for SP heal at wave start for one and highest damage for the other. Just make sure before getting into the section that you have the resources for them, at least on turn 1, as Grand Welcome helps afterwards. You'll probably won't have to care for the bandages thing unless you have a few sinners' deaths by the end of wave 1. And that's pretty much it for what I can say, so once you're done with this one, congrats! You finished the railway! For my own experience, I did 2 wall attempts on stream if you want to check them, the first one being my first try, with a burn team where I ended in 54 turns, and the second, which is where I tried to optimize the compositions and theory crafting, where I ended in 52 turns. Yeah, this was obviously not my best optimization, and can be improved, but was mainly done for trying stuff. All I can affirm is that burn is pretty good overall, and Don Sinclair does quite a bit, but it's very hard to manage. Section 4 is where I got the most value from optimization, so I can also affirm that sinking is extremely good at the end, but tremor and rupture might be very quick if you can prepare a setup. However, setups during Peccatula fights are very hard to do, as you might have to adapt a lot to what they do. In the end, that's where most of the difficulty and turns of the run come from, so again don't hesitate to take time to adapt properly and think a few turns in advance. Because of those fights, egos will be key, and preparing resources for them will be very important, so try to prepare a balanced team on the first section to gather resources, or at least for these scenes you know you will want to consume, which may include gloom in most cases, and might require lust or envy. As much as I'd love to say that BL would be good overall, their scenes generation might be a problem. To conclude with my own impressions of the railway, I love the NV Peccatula fights. They are some of the greatest fights of the game to test yourself in my opinion, fitting with how they work. In comparison, both fights were pretty disappointing. All bosses had only one body part and gimmick to each of them, which could even be ignored with enough damage, especially Sheep and the King. The King in particular feels like the weakest railway final boss fight. The wave before gives flavor to it, but the fight itself still is disappointing. Portrait was a pushover, but just avoiding its mechanic is harder because of protection and all. If you're not playing a damage archetype at least. But you also don't have scenes at that point. Nelly is just easy. Stations 2 and 6 wave fights also weren't too interesting, outside of section 1 wave 2 hands with both Josephine and Hindley. Overall, if it weren't for the mirror fights, the railway would have probably been somewhat disappointing. But those fights give this railway its full flavor and are some of the best fights in the game right now. Funny coming from Peccatulas. I wonder if they'll have stronger versions too. I'm not sure I want to know. And that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Final message, I'll be away for the week following this video, so I'll give news in the community tab, but shorts will be delayed to the following week. Next video will be later, and should be about support and bench. Subscribe and check the community tab for more news. In any case, see you next time, and keep your sanity high in this slow descent into the inferno.